You know who's a great guy? Mike Carparelli. If you go to carparelligutars.com, he'll send you some of the best guitar components money can buy. Or he'll build you an absolute soulmate of a guitar. I play a Carparelli. You should too. Welcome to Chapter 6 in our series on tracking drums in Midi using Logic Pro X. We are coming to the final stages of our drum arrangement, and we're completing our song. And we've come to the point where we want to add some more complexity to our tune, and that means adding fills to our drum arrangement. And that is going to cue up some of the changes and try to add some dynamics and tasteful licks and things like that to make the song come alive. Admittedly, this is one of the more complicated, possibly frustrating parts of arranging tracks based on your background with drumming or rhythms and your ability to analyze and understand those types of things. This will be a process of varying degrees of difficulty. There is a learning curve if you're new to this, so be patient. It does take time to get a real sense of this and make it flow easily and be able to do it well. And that's just the nature of the game. There are certainly people who do this better than I do. I'm not even a drummer by trade, so if I can do it, basically anybody can eventually. All right, so let's get into it. I want you to have this video for free. But if you've got $2 or $3 lying around, and you can kick them over here, it helps me take time from my real job and do more of this. So find the link below, go to PayPal, select only the least of what you can afford, and just know that I'd really appreciate it. Okay, looking at our screen here, you can see I have 2 drum tracks. This is the one I have made with the fills, so I put together some just rough and dirty fills to get you started and give us some things to look at. And what I'm going to do is duplicate that process on the second track. So I have 2 tracks here with the same drum set selected, although I've changed the icon. If you want to change the icon for this in Logic, you can right-click and this will show up and you can choose a different picture. All right, so you can also see that I have taken our drum loops, which were these, and I have cut them up into sections where the fills are occurring, and I've changed the color of them so that we can easily identify them. And the way to do that is to left-click on top of the field or anywhere in the editing field, and you show hide colors, and then this thing will appear, and you can highlight a region and just change the color to anything you want. Let's give a listen to our song in context, and you'll hear some of the fills because I just want to show you where we're headed. Right, so you can hear the fills for the verse and the chorus part of our little arrangement here. I also have a count in and an introductory fill at the beginning. And you can see that we have an 8-bar pattern for the verse and the chorus part. It's not really a verse and a chorus, but that's what we're calling it. And I've added a fill at the 4th bar of each section, and then one that cues up the change to the different part of the song. All right, let's listen to the variations or fills we came up with for the bridge. So let's get into how we did this. What we're going to do is look at the fills, and then we're going to go through the process of duplicating them, and then you can see what I did. So let's take a look at this intro fill, and we've got a count in on the hi-hat. Obviously that is optional. And then we've got this little snare fill here to cue up the beginning of the song. We've got 3 snare hits here, and you can see the varying degrees of velocity. And if we're analyzing the rhythm here, we've got on the 4 beat, and then we got 4 and then the 4 and So if we're counting through this, it's 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and In this song, we're keeping the timing fairly tight. There's no rule about having to place the notes exactly on the beat. You can loosen up the rhythm a bit by nudging the notes off by a couple of milliseconds. And that's okay. The human ear can hear things close together, and sometimes it helps to break up that sound so that the 2 sounds are not totally synchronized. But we're going to talk about that later. But just for our purposes here, we'll keep the beat as tight as possible. And try to remember, if you would like to keep those notes right on the bar, you can highlight a note and then quantize it if needs be. The next thing we have is a cymbal crash on the 1 of the following bar. Okay, and that's right here. So I took the hi-hat note out and I just moved it up to a cymbal crash. In most of these cases, you have a left and right crash, and they're slightly different sounding. One might be a 16-inch, one might be a 17-inch, and they all sound different. And often they are panned naturally to the left and the right in the mix. And of course, as we, if you're going to mix down this song, you'll probably separate those anyhow. But for our purposes now, we can just add the variation. For this case, I'm using a pretty light cymbal crash because I don't want the cymbals to be overbearing and dominate the beat too much. Because if it's a very loud one, it will sort of drown out the notes around it. But you just want, in this case, because the beat in this song and the feeling is quite light, I'm going to keep that velocity really low, 30 or 40. Let's move up to the fill in the middle of the verse. 2 snare hits that where we've changed the accent. Instead of going on the 2 and the 4, I've changed it to the 3 and the 4 and if I really want to demonstrate that, I can change this to 8th notes. And you can see that more clearly. So we're counting 3 and 4 and the 1. And then I'm alternating those with the kicks on the 3 and the 4. I've also added a hi-hat swell right here. I don't want any big dynamic changes, so I've left the velocities on the kick and the snare the same as the normal beat. Let's go up to our new drum track. I'm going to go to the 4th bar, and I'm going to cut this loop up. So to do that, I'm going to hover over it and right-click, and then it's going to give me this option to split at playhead, which is also Control-T or Command-T. And you can cut up this loop and it will just create and restart the loop after it. So you have to set the playhead where you would like the split to happen. And you can see that it divided the loop into 2 MIDI regions for us. And I'm going to need to change the second one because we have to add the cymbal crash. So we're using these 2 MIDI regions right here. To identify them, I'm going to change the color. Okay, and we can go down to the editing field and make our fill. So I'm moving 2 snare hits to the 3 and the 4 and of the bar. I'm not going to need that. Probably not going to need that. And I want to use a hi-hat swell, which means opening the hi-hat. And I'm going to need a kick sound on the 4, and I'm going to keep the same velocity. So I'm just going to copy and paste or borrow the note from earlier in the beat. And then we have to add a cymbal crash on the 1. Keep that around 40. Okay, so let's listen to that in context and see how it's sounding. Just going to give a little more range on the loop. Okay, I'm going to take the solo off the track. All right, let's leave that fill for now, and we'll go on to the next fill on the verse, which cues up the change to the chorus. So that should be here. Okay, so we're on the 10th bar, and we're going to add the fill to the 9th bar and the cymbal crash to the beginning of the 10th. So we're going to need to split this one, and I'm going to change the color again so we can find it. Right, so this is the beginning of the chorus, this is the end of the verse, and here's our little fill. It's quite simple. We've got a snare hit on the 3 and then we have 2 taps on the mid tom and the low tom, and a cymbal crash here on the 1. Okay, let's take a look at this as it passes. Okay, and we'll look at the velocity ranges of these. You can see on the toms I have a lighter hit here and a heavier hit. I think it goes up to close to 100 and 65. You'll notice with toms on the Midi kits, they are sometimes are quite light in feeling, and they can easily get lost in the mix. And so you might have to go a little heavier on the velocity of those just so they can be heard. But it does change the tonality as you raise it, so you want to find that sweet spot. You can accentuate the tom hits with a kick. The velocity on these kicks is quite light, it's below 10, but you can bring them up to, 20 or 30. Really depends. You can make it really heavy if you really want that to give it some low end. But a kick hit on the tom is what drummers tend to do anyhow, because it fills out the low end, and the tom itself might hold the high end together, and you can hear that go. And you may have to experiment with how that sounds overall. All right, let's go back to our new track and replicate these to go through the process. You'll notice if I highlight 2 loops like that, they will both appear in the Finder or the editing field. If I just want one, I would just obviously highlight the 1 field. But if you'd like to see both working together, choose them both. All right, so let's construct our fill here. So I'm going 3 and on the snare, 4 and 4 and on the toms. So I have the mid tom and the low tom here. All right, let's deal with the velocity on the toms. All right, I'm going to try this a little heavier because I want to hear how this tom sounds at about 100. I'm going to leave the snare about the same. I'm going to hear how it sounds with this hi-hat here. It might add a little too much and make it too busy. Okay, let's hear what we got. I don't know if you're hearing what I'm hearing. I would like this tom to be a little lighter to contrast with the next hit. and I have a feeling this is going to be a little too heavy. Let's listen to it in context and see if I'm right. That's not bad. I'm still finding this tom hit a little too heavy for this part of the song. I'm going to take it down to about 90. The reason is I'm trying to think of the whole song, and this is the early part of the song, there's a crescendo sort of building up towards the bridge, and I want to leave a little bit of headroom to build up to that. If everything's too powered at the beginning of the song for this particular tune, I'm sort of feeling like it'll leave a little to be desired there. So I'm sort of making decisions now that I know I may go back and change later. All right, let's listen to the fills we've made for the verse, and then we can move on to the chorus.